There's a lot of things that I have learned from my in-laws about how to raise a kid well. Like, assuming good intent avoids a lot of fights. If there's a safety issue that they're just not budging on, it's okay to make the decision to stop using Grandparent Daycare. Because at the end of the day, they're doing you the biggest favor in the world, which is taking care of your kid and loving on them all day long and saving you thousands of dollars. Hey guys, today we're going to talk about Grandparent Daycare, something I'm especially grateful for after working from home for a week with a toddler while having COVID. Hi Nora, say hi. Hi. We've been using my in-laws for daycare for about 15 months now, and there's a lot that we've learned along the way, particularly just tricks to preserve our really close relationship with them while also using them as daycare. We've run into a few things that I think we've actually handled pretty well, and I wanted to share that experience with you guys in case it's helpful. So yeah, we're gonna go down the big slide. All right, let's get started. All right, so the first thing that I think is really helpful is a schedule. Predictability is everything. So when we first started Grandparent Daycare, we were alternating between having my mother-in-law watch Nora at their house and watching her at our house. The reason why this was a problem is because when we dropped her off at their house, we had control over when daycare started. When she was coming to our house, we were at the mercy of their schedule, and my in-laws tend to be really late people. And that was really difficult because then we were stuck with Nora on calls with us and things like that. When we transitioned to having her fully over at their house, things just got a lot simpler. We also got a lot more consistent with our start time. We probably have about like an hour window where we tend to drop her off in the morning. In the evenings, it tends to vary a bit more because both my husband and I have jobs where sometimes we'll have to work late, especially my husband. And luckily, my in-laws don't mind if Nora stays there a little bit longer in the evenings, but that's something you should definitely check with your caregiver on if they're okay with that or not. Second item is having a plan for meals. Now, what we tend to do is I will batch cook everything on Sunday night after Nora goes to bed for the week, and then we do kind of a restock on Wednesday depending on how much of everything that she's eaten. Now, that works really well for us. If your caregiver is fine with making food for your child, then that's awesome, but I just didn't want to put that burden on my mother-in-law. She does stock things that she knows Nora likes. So for example, my child is obsessed with cottage cheese. She always has it on hand, and she will also keep things like fruit and an extra stash of whole milk. So beyond food, you'll also want to have a stash of essentials at their house if they have the space for it. So the things that we keep at my in-laws include diapers. I get the giant box that will last you a month, and we work our way through those. When she gets to kind of the last sleeve, I restock. I do the same thing with wipes. I get like a massive Costco box of them, and then once we get down to the last couple, I'll restock. If your family members don't have as much space, then you may need to bring them over more often, but in smaller batches. We also tend to leave clothes and a single pair of shoes at their house. So I will literally bring like a gift bag full of clothes every couple of weeks until I hear that they're low. And that way, if Nora spills something, my mother-in-law can just throw it in the wash and she's got clean clothes at the ready, or she can send the dirty clothes home with us and we'll just replenish her stash. So I would also recommend whatever medicine you keep on hand at your house, keep on hand at their house. So for us, this is Tylenol and ibuprofen. That way, in case Nora has a fever, they're not having to wait for us to run medicine over, or they're not having to run out to get it. They just already have it on hand. We also leave a stash of toys at their house. We've kind of rotated things in as time goes on. We get the Love Every play kits, and so whenever I get a new one, I tend to send half of it to their house and I keep the other half at our house. We also now have been able to leave some of those toys there long term because my nephew, who's about 6 months younger than Nora, is now starting to play with the toys that she's kind of like aging out of a little bit, so it's worked out really well. We also purchased a pack and play for their house that lives upstairs in a spare bedroom. And we also have all of the nap time essentials. So things like pack and play sheets, sleep sacks, like a toy to cuddle with, and has kind of established her comfort zone at their house. And lastly, we provided a high chair. We're actually looking into getting a booster seat so that it takes up less space now that the kids are able to sit a little bit more independently. So you also want to get to know their parenting style. Preferably do this before you start daycare in case your parenting styles just don't align. So as an example, if If I had had a conversation with my in-laws where they were like, we spank for discipline and we're not going to change, I would have taken Nora to a normal daycare. They kind of overly coddle her, in my opinion. But you know what? It's not hurting her. Like, she expects different things at their house than she does at our house. This is where we get into some more controversial stuff. Their house, their rules. I think if you're asking them to watch your child at their house, they're going to do things differently than how you would do them. And they're a part of your village, so you should trust their opinion. So as an example, when Nora's at our house, I tend to let her feed herself. It's messy, but it helps her experience different textures, try things on her own. But my mother-in-law just doesn't like to do that. Like, she wants to feed her with like a spoon and a fork herself, partly because she wants the extra time with Nora, but also because it's less messy. And you know what? Nora still feeds herself. I don't think it's holding back their development. So it's not something that I'm gonna try to mandate. They do differently. Also, Nora has a totally different nap routine at their house than she does at our house. She sleeps great at both places, so who am I to judge? Now, I will say the one exception to their house, their rules is if there's a safety issue. And that brings me into my next point, which is address issues with understanding and grace. Especially safety issues, guys. Like, your family member, especially if they've raised kids before, guidelines were probably very different. Like, think about things that were so common when we were kids, like crib bumpers or, you know, certain toys, and like they're not considered safe now. So like it might just be a difference in expectations. Now, I'll give you an example of how I approached something. We came in one day recently and she was giving Nora grapes and they weren't cut up. They were like kind of squished, which is what we usually do with blueberries, but they were still a little too round in shape and she was at risk of choking. We were like, hey, like, this is the reason why it's a choking hazard is because it's round. It can kind of squish, but it kind of will expand again. That helps it get caught in their throat. You really need to cut it kind of long ways in order for it to be safer. And once I showed her how to do it and I explained it, she understood, because I don't think anyone's loved one intends to put their kid in an unsafe situation. It just happens because you may not know. So just approach it from that angle and you'll probably avoid a lot of fights. If there's a safety issue that they're just not budging on, it's okay to make the decision to stop using grandparent daycare. Maybe that comes from a place of privilege because I know that I could afford daycare on a whim if I really needed it, but I just wouldn't want to sacrifice my really strong relationship with my in-laws for that money. Like, if you're not getting the quality that you're looking for, you're probably going to have to pay for it. And that's a harsh reality, but it's honest and something that you might have to consider. So also, if you're enjoying this video so far, please like and subscribe so that it reaches more people. It also helps me understand what content you guys enjoy seeing. So now a little bit more into life stuff. You gotta remember that they have a life too. So there's gonna be times where they have doctor's appointments or they have plans in an evening and need you to pick up your kid early, and you should try to respect those wherever you can, because at the end of the day, they're doing you the biggest favor in the world, which is taking care of your kid and loving on them all day long and saving you thousands of dollars. This happens a lot to us personally because my father-in-law tends to work weekends. So my in-laws used to get Thursdays and Fridays off together, and now their Thursdays and Fridays are occupied with their grandchildren, which they do love, but sometimes they do need a little bit of time just for themselves. You also want to make sure to spend some time together as a family outside of your daycare times. This allows them to really enjoy their grandkids in a different capacity. So as an example, we try to take my in-laws out to dinner or go to the parks with them on weekends. That way they can experience their grandkids without the burden of having to take care of every little need that the child has. You should also think about contributing to your village. So an example of this is if you're not the only child using grandparent daycare, help out with the other kid as well. Like, I might walk in the evening and my nephew needs a diaper change and a snack, and my mother-in-law is in the bathroom with Nora trying to get her to use the toilet because she's trying to potty train her. Bless her, she's wonderful. And so you know what I do? I change the poopy diaper. You get in what you put out. So If you put out a lot of help into that village, then you're gonna receive a lot of help back. All right, so full disclosure, this one's been really hard for me. You gotta swallow your pride a lot of the time. There's two things I'll touch on here. First of all, if you're working a full-time job, your kid is going to spend as much or more time with their grandparents during the week than they will spend with you. And I get jealous of that, and it makes me sad sometimes, but there's nothing quite like giving your child time with people that love them like that. So I do try really hard to remember that. I do get jealous sometimes, if I'm being honest. And the other thing too is they're gonna know better than you sometimes about what to do with your kid. My mother-in-law is able to discipline Nora way better than I can. Like, she can talk in a soft voice and explain to Nora why something is wrong, and Nora stops in her tracks. Sometimes they really know better, and that's hard to accept, but it's like, you have to remember that it's all coming from like a really positive, good place. The reason why things work so well for them is because they've taken the time to really get to know and love your child, and you should be grateful for that, even when it's a little hard for you to accept. Say thank you a lot and do it in their love language, you know? So if they're gift people, get them a gift. If they're words of affirmation people, a card does wonders. Like, quality time, take them to the zoo. Like, I don't know, like do something that's gonna make them happy and know that they're appreciated. And lastly, this is kind of a weird one, but don't forget about the other grandparents. I know that my parents would love to be our daycare, but they're just not in a place right now where they want to leave their jobs, and they also don't live in our city. So we do make time to call them a lot and go on trips to see them whenever we can, because we want them to know that they're loved too. What I don't want is to end up with some sort of jealousy between the two sets of parents because my in-laws get so much time with our daughter. So I'd love to know in the comments, are you looking to have a loved one be your daycare? And what are you worried about? Because again, I know I was there, and it's kind of nice to hear what other parents are going through too. Anyways, I hope this helps. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.